As much as I am just absolutely thrilled to cover the guy who, like, publicly decided to call me a pedophile and then do a series of videos basically doing things that 100% you could call defamation, just did not result in enough damages to actually yield anything from that. Not that I would even fucking try. Dude's a weirdo. As much as I want to cover him, I'm gonna have to talk instead about this fan art right here. So, okay. I love when people send me fan art, but this one from Marky7, this one is showcasing my trauma when y'all motherfuckers, every single one of you weirdos, decided that you were going to force me to say so many of one unspeakable word back to back that I got physically exhausted and had to go to bed early. It is amazing that I have an audience that is simultaneously so wonderful and kind and supportive, and at the same time, cruel as hell. I do not know what kind of findom bullshit y'all guys got up to before coming into my audience, but I've given up, and I've just accepted that each one of you is fucked up in your own unique way. It's a minute 22, right? Like, YouTube is going to allow me to say the fuck word, right? Aether88 says, we're going to do it again? Absolutely not. I will just yank you away. Progress Only says, thank you, Suris. Why are you guys patting yourselves on the back? You're all corrupt. Anyway, thank you for this one, Marky. I appreciate it, even if it is emblemizing my own trauma from a couple Wednesdays ago. That said, if you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and pop up over here. Hi, YoungRippa. I can't wait to see him respond to my video and call me a pedophile again.
Once was this place that a lot of people found to be desirable.
He's talking about New York City, by the way.
Not myself, but others did, especially outsiders. They looked at it as if it represented America. It represented commerce. It represented all the things that they found to be right with this country in America.
Yeah?
Big hub, financial hub especially. And
it's weird that he's focusing so much on the capitalist parts of it. Like, ignore the culture. Ignore the fact that New York is made up of a bunch of different races and cultures, and it's beautiful watching all kinds of different people fold together. Nah, it's all about the money. Money, 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 money.
Now it does appear that Zohran Mamdani is going to become the next mayor, and he's a literal communist.
No, he's not. He's actually a social democrat. A communist is somebody who aims for a classless, moneyless, stateless society. Zohran Mamdani, on the other hand, doesn't seem to actually be the kind of person that wants that. He definitely seems to be very pro-capitalist. And you know what? Being a politician in the United States, I can imagine being full-on against capitalism may be a little difficult to actually be if you're planning on getting anything accomplished in any way, shape, or form. But the point is, he's not a communist. He's not going to dismantle New York and turn it into a stateless society where nobody has to spend money on everything. That's not what he's doing. So, okay, let's hear his reasoning.
And I want to talk about the implications there. Hadn't had a chance to really discuss it in detail because I do have a lot of thoughts about it. But make no mistake, all you have to do is really go to this guy's Twitter.
Okay.
Recent as well as those of the past, and you can see what he is. He's pretty open about that. He quotes Marx and such, no issues doing that. He doesn't.
I mean, cool.
But here's a tweet right here. He talks about Cuomo. He says he refuses to tax the rich. He's refusing to let workers enjoy the wealth they created. Again, he's a little communist.
Is it communism to say that workers make wealth? Like, let's say that I am a wealthy person, right? And I buy a factory, and I don't do anything after that. I don't hire people to work at the factory, and I try to handle it all on my own. You know what happens? I've just bought a money pit, and that's it. I can't do anything after that. That's all that's left there. In order for that factory to generate wealth at all, I must be willing to pay workers to work in that factory. That is just a fact. I need people to be able to generate wealth from that factory. It does not by itself create wealth. I, as the factory owner, do not have the expertise. I do not have the longevity. I do not have any of the things required in order to extract wealth from that investment. I need workers. Without workers, the factory owner doesn't make goods. And when the factory owner doesn't make goods, he does not generate wealth. That is a non-negotiable reality. That is how the world works. So to argue that the wealth of New York was not generated by the plethora of diverse people in New York, working in New York, generating wealth by working, then you are ignoring a huge reality. That's not communism. In fact, you can argue that that's capitalism because you're talking about workers generating wealth. If workers are generating wealth, you're either in capitalism or you're in socialism because you're worried about fucking money. You're not in communism.
When he says low taxes foster a business-friendly environment, he means an environment where it's easy for bosses to steal from workers. Taxation isn't theft, capitalism is. Well, I obviously take great exception to it, but I do want you to pay attention to what he's saying. Cuomo, who by every metric is a leftist, he's more...
I mean, wait, Cuomo is a leftist? In what ways? Cuomo's stances have seemed very, very, like, standard liberal. That's not really leftist. Because usually one of the indicating factors for somebody who's a leftist is that they want to pull people further and further. They want to pull the country further and further to the left. It's why you identify them as a leftist, because that is an identifying factor of them. But okay.
Closely aligned to Mamdani than he is to myself, like an anarcho-capitalist, but to him and the many that think like him, anybody to the right of Stalin is basically this pro-uber capitalist person.
Not really. Not really. So Stalin was definitely not very good for his own workers. I am not an expert on everything that happened in pre-Russia Soviet Union. I am not an expert to that. So if you want to hold my feet to the fire on that, do a video response, say how unbased and stupid I am, go ahead. Leftist infighting certainly got us where we are right now, and I'm sure it's going to continue to get us exactly where we want to be. Point is, though, there are several shades of leftist that are further to the right of, I mean, you're saying Stalin, but you're not really meaning Stalin. You're meaning Stalin as a stand-in for communism. I'm willing to bet that. And when you're meaning Stalin as a stand-in for communism, then yeah, there's several fucking shades to the right of communism on the political spectrum. Anselin says, can American leftists even make it to the center compared to the rest of the world? Said by Stalin, I guess he means Marx. I mean, he's thinking Stalin as in, like, the Marxist-Leninist state of the Soviet Union, I think is what he's... Again, it's Stalin as stand-in, not Stalin as actual idea that has any merit to it. And that's not me just trying to dismiss YoungRippa's ideas, as much as I would like to. That would be incredibly easy to do. But no, generally speaking, when I see people talk this way, they're not actually trying to eliminate an idea. They're using a thought-terminating cliche. If you're on the right, you think Stalin bad. Okay, fair enough. And then you use Stalin as a stand-in for every type of, like, leftist conversation ever. This is how you get people to think that people like Zohran Mamdani are communists. Again, a communist is a person who wants to aim for a classless, moneyless, stateless society. I don't think Mamdani is wanting to dismantle the state. I don't think he's wanting to eradicate currency. And I'm fairly certain that he's not anti-class anything. Dude seems to be fairly liberal, like objectively so.
There's also a video that I want to take a look at. You have this guy talking, and again, I'm not one of those that likes to police people's speech and like talk about like the type of rhetoric or whatever that they like to use. I more so want to speak about what they're saying.
Okay.
And when they just flat out admit their positions and where they're coming from, I think it's very, very important that you listen. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of lies. But this is a guy that is proud of what he is and what he believes in. But let's take a listen real quick.
Is that every single person should have housing. And I think faced with these two options, the system has hundreds of thousands of people unhoused, right? For what? And
so as of right now, for every one homeless person in the United States, we have 30 homes. 30. That is a wild number, is it not? We have 30 homes. Now I'm going to very quickly, let me see here. I'm going to very quickly pull up the stats for you real quick. Sorry, I lied. I lied to you. It was all smoke and mirrors. I apologize. I was wrong. The number was incorrect. I gave you a Mott and Bailey. I'm sorry. The number is actually 28. But it depends on where you are. So like in the Midwest, in Chicago, for every 50 vacant houses, there's one unhoused person. 50 vacant houses for every unhoused person. How the fuck do you develop a system that back-asswards? Again, it depends on where you are, but the average across the United States is about 28 houses per homeless or unhoused person. That is crazy to me. And this is because over time, housing has become either a luxury good or something that has been thoroughly gentrified. Think about this for a moment. Think about this. Here in Georgia, a good deal on rent for a 1-bedroom and bathroom apartment can be anywhere between $1,200 and $1,500. That's considered a pretty damn good deal around here. However, a mortgage will run you probably all of half that. But in order to afford a mortgage, you need a lot of money, usually about 10 to 15% to put down as a down payment. And most houses and land in Georgia are going to run you between $100,000 and $300,000 for the house and land combined. This means you're going to need $10,000 to $30,000 at minimum in order to come to the negotiating table to get your house. Now, there's a lot of other expenses that you have to consider, but isn't that wild and wacky that for a 2-bedroom house, you could spend all of half of what you would spend on an apartment? And yet, because apartments cost so much compared to the houses, we find ourselves in this very awkward scenario where a person could afford to buy a house if only they could come to the negotiating table to prove that they could make the monthly payment to the bank. But they can make the monthly payment to the bank because they've been making the monthly payment in doubles to apartment complexes. This prevents people from being able to accrue generational wealth. It prevents people from being able to pass down stable housing to their kids. It prevents people from being able to do anything but work paycheck to paycheck. It is a system designed to keep you locked in one position for as long as humanly possible. Subinarch says, don't forget about property tax. I'm not trying to forget about property tax. Like I said, there are other things to deal with. But as an example, where I live, property tax can range from $500 to about $1,200 a year. So add in another $100 to the mortgage, and you still don't get to the number for the apartment unit. Anselin says maybe quit letting investment companies buy everything. Yeah, that's the whole BlackRock conversation. So why support a system where that happens? Like, I understand being pro-capitalist because you want people to be free to make financial decisions, even at a business level. But that's you effectively pretending that the business owners, the ones with the most capital, are in a position that directly benefits the consumers. But they don't have to do that. Like, the myth that competition always breeds better outcomes for industries is a myth that's undermined by marketing, because you don't need a better product. You just need to be able to market to people that your product is better, even if it's worse. You don't need to have a better business practice. You just need to be able to convince people that you have the better business. Or you can do what Southern Company did here in Georgia. You can lobby to have what's called a parallel monopoly, where people can't actually choose who their power company is, because if you are anywhere in Georgia, you likely only have one choice. And that is either going to be Southern Company or the, quote, Southern Company competitor that has a parallel monopoly alongside Southern Company. Anyway, point is, system's broken, and supporting it feels weird to me. If
there was any system that could guarantee each person housing, whether you call it the abolition of private property or you call it, just a statewide housing guarantee, it is preferable to what is going on.
Abolition of private property.
And I think that people try.
Is that okay? So that's not abolition of private property. That's not. Because the factory is still private property. Private property is that which generates capital. There's also something to note here. Okay, from a leftist perspective, there are 3 kinds of property. There's private property, there is personal property, and then there is public property. So public property is going to be like a state park. That is something that is government funded. That is something that is theoretically owned by us all. Personal property is your house, your toothbrush. I don't want your fucking toothbrush, and I don't want your house. Your house has your kids. Your kids are nasty. And private property is property that which generates capital. The factory, the rental property. These are properties that generate capital. Typically, the fear-mongering against any type of leftist policy is always going to be about, oh no, you're not going to be allowed to own everything. When, no, if you were scared about not owning everything, then you'd be having troubles with Netflix, with Crunchyroll, with Game Pass. Because each and every one of those is based on a model where you own nothing and have to be happy about it. You get to own none of the games that are on Game Pass, but you get to play them. So until they get removed from Game Pass, you get to have them. Or the Nintendo Switch Online system, where you get all the little emulated games. Isn't that so great? Own nothing. All subscription models. Games as service. Own nothing and be happy about it. If your concern is about owning nothing, then you and I probably have the same enemy, but you think that enemy manifests in a completely different way than I do. Anyway.
Try and play like gotcha games about these kinds of things, and it's like, look, I care more about whether somebody has a home.
And all that, and that's what communists do, right? They get to, or they attempt to rather, lead with their moronic ideas that they just care about the people. Never mind.
Is it moronic to care about the people? Like, is it so? Do you really think it's moronic to care about the people, or do you think it's moronic that a communist is trying to convince people that they care about the people? Again, you haven't sold me on the idea that Mamdani is a communist, because I haven't seen like the abolition of the state as one of his proposals quite yet. And I feel like that's kind of like a bottom barrel proposal to convince me that somebody's a communist.
Mind their policy of economic illiteracy historically. You look at communism, doesn't matter where it has ever been implemented. Doesn't matter whether it's Cambodia and Pol Pot, Zedong, Mao, or what have you, North Korea, doesn't matter. Obviously, Russia. Following it is...
Did Russia actually have communism? I don't think Russia actually had communism. And Russia today is a fully capitalist state. Are you talking about the Soviet Union, maybe? Also, North Korea... Pretty sure that has like full-on state capitalism, doesn't it? Like China does? Because that's what China's system is. China's system is called state capitalism. So the USSR was state capitalist, the PRC. Yeah, like I feel like you don't understand, like you're saying a lot of stuff about economic illiteracy, but it's really weird hearing a bunch of economically illiterate points coming from you. Now, I'm not trying to say that I'm the best person when it comes to economics. I'm not, absolutely not. I'm not the expert. My argument is that I believe that neither are you.
Usually mass murders, genocide, famine.
I feel like if you're gonna be against genocide, we need to have a conversation about what's happening in Palestine. That's a whataboutism, though. That's me technically engaging in a fallacy, so dismiss that. Because it doesn't matter for the point here.
Famines, all of the things that... you look at in recent modern history, communism, governments in general, but especially governments that have been advocates of communism and say that they're doing things in the name of communism is responsible for quite literally several millions of people.
Okay, cool. So what he's doing right now is utilizing the big black book of communism. That's what this is from. He's not quoting it directly, but he's using the onus from that book, the logic from that book. Thing is, with the big black book of communism, the goal was literally to inflate the numbers as much as possible because the author wanted to get to the 100 million dead because of communism. Also, when you make these statements about communism, again, you still haven't sold me that Mamdani's actually a communist, but I'm just going to sit on this one for a minute. When you make those statements there, you have to ask the question, okay, well, what is the better alternative? Because if the better alternative is capitalism, then, okay, so we're going to talk about the number of bodies created by capitalism then, because we were ready and willing to talk about the number of bodies created by communism. And if we're willing to talk about the number of bodies created by capitalism, then we have to be talking about people who died because they were not able to get health care. We have to talk about people who starved because they could not afford food. We have to talk about people who were directly affected by capitalism. And this isn't even talking about the fact that most nations, I mean, every nation right now is capitalist. That's just the reality of it. Every nation right now is capitalist. But you're also ignoring the fact, or not ignoring the fact, you also have to count the fact that nations that are capitalistic tend to also engage in a lot of violence, either state-enforced violence on their own people, as we see here in the United States with our police force, with ICE. You also have to talk about state-enforced violence abroad. How many regimes has the United States personally violently flipped over utilizing the CIA? How many countries have we invaded in a perpetual state of war? How many bodies have we personally, just the United States, created? Tegus says, my family keeps on saying that Hamas was voted in by the people and therefore the people of Palestine deserve what happened to them. Okay, cool. The United States people voted for Trump. Therefore, all of us deserve every bad thing that a nation might try to throw on us. I don't think that fucking follows. I don't. I think that is a stupid and naive concept thought up by people who cannot think of anybody outside of the terms of being like a child to a parent or a student to a teacher. They can't think of any scale greater than one-on-one. I think that's the position of somebody who cannot think at scale. And there's nothing wrong with not being able to think at scale. That's not like a moral failing. But when you take that naivete and wield it as a bludgeon, I feel like there's a conversation to be had about the harm that comes from spreading it.
Not this quasi sort of way that communists like to try to attribute to capitalism. No, we're talking like literal deaths. People being killed, oft.
Oh, I see. So he wouldn't agree with the framing that people who starve under capitalism are victims of capitalism, even though that's some of the framing that was used in the Big Book of Communism to get to the 100 million number. He would agree with that framing when it comes to communism, but he would not agree to that framing when it comes to capitalism. Because the only way you get to the communism has called death is by calling regimes that were not necessarily communistic, and also inflating the numbers quite a bit. I'm okay with using those inflated numbers so long as we're okay with passing that buck both ways instead of just one way. Like, I'm okay dealing with those numbers. I'm not bothered by the idea of big, scary numbers. I'm not. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't have a horseshoe to rest anywhere here. Necrochild also pointed out that with the Hamas thing, there's been 15 years since an election. So, like, I guess all of the children who did not vote, they just deserve to be bombed because their parents voted. Maybe their parents didn't even vote. Maybe their parents voted against them. What are we going to do? Check their voting records? Aha, you voted for the regime 20 years ago. Die. Sakura says, didn't the Big Book of Communism count deaths of people who weren't even conceived? Yes. Again, so like when historians analyze the Big Black Book of Communism, the critique given to it usually is that the number 100 million was thought up by the author, and then the author did every trick in the book, but did every trick in the book possible to get to that number, irrespective of if that number was legitimately earned. Like, that was the critique of the book. And I agree that just trying to get to the scary number, like, I understand why you would do it. It sells way better. Big numbers sell. Why do you think the video games industry is currently suffering from bloat? Big numbers sell. People love big numbers. They love games getting bigger. They love things getting bigger. They love numbers getting bigger. It's a super cool thing to see the giant thing. I'm playing an MMO right now, quite literally a game about accelerating larger numbers. Larger numbers are shiny. Larger numbers bring people in. Larger numbers are preferable to smaller numbers. It's how our brains are wired. But it's also really important to recognize when historians are looking at your method for getting to the big shiny numbers and saying, hey, maybe this shit, not great. I don't know. I'm only 4 minutes into the fucking video. Let's continue. My critique is currently off the rails because I'm not trying to like give a defense of communism, because I'm not a communist. I'm not going to sit here and try to defend a political philosophy that I do not myself fully agree with. Instead, what I'm trying to do is to point out the flaws in the methodology. But the flaws in the methodology are from ages ago. We are now very, very divorced from that. Instead, I need evidence that Mamdani is a communist. That's what I need. So, YoungRippa, the thesis of your video is that Mamdani is a communist. It is the title of your video. I am willing to call it the thesis. If I'm going to sit here and grade this like an essay, I need you to prove your thesis. Hypothesis: Mamdani is a communist. By the end of this video essay, YoungRippa will prove it to us. Let's go.
Now, this is a serious thing that people need to be honest about. The fact that a guy like this, and I would look, I'm a libertarian, but if there is a deportable offense advocating communism, which is advocating for acts of aggression upon your neighbors, you can easily make the argument that that's the ethical, moral position to get them up out of there and physically remove them from everybody else that wants peace and somewhat prosperity. Okay.
What are you even talking about? Who was engaging in violence against their neighbors? Are we talking about deporting ICE? Because, like, I'm okay with that.
But again, what we need to talk about is just how easy it is for a guy like this, who is an admitted socialist, and you've seen this over the
wait, hold on. Hold the fuck phone on. Your thesis is that he's a communist. You've been calling him a communist. So why did you just now say admitted socialist? Wait. Hold the fucking phone, my guy. Which is it? Is he a socialist, aka somebody who believes that the workers should own the means of production, but that money should still exist, the state should still exist, and yes, even a class-based society is still a thing that we are likely going to have? Or is he a communist, a person who advocates for a stateless, classless, moneyless society? Wait, buddy. Which one is it? Because in this video, you've called him a communist, but you've also said he calls himself a socialist. Okay, so far, the data points to socialist. I would argue that he's still not that, because unless he starts wanting to, democratize New York's greater private industry, he's not a socialist. Because that is what socialism is. It is the democratization of private industry, proletariat owning the means of production. It is what that word means.
Communism, you're going to get those that try to split those hairs as they have done over the years. But
Oh, okay, I see. So he can't prove that Mamdani's a communist. He can't. Because his defense is going to be that leftists split the hairs about communism and socialism, while the guy calls himself an anarcho-capitalist, and would likely take umbrage if I were to misinterpret what flavor of capitalist he is, because that's why he gave himself such a specific label. If you are willing to give yourself a specific label about your political philosophy, then you should be willing to accept the specifics of the label of political philosophy that other people have ascribed to themselves. Instead of going, no, they're just going to split hairs because they're different.
You need to understand it is more a recent phenomena that those terms, they tried to split those.
That's not a recent phenomenon. No. The more recent phenomenon is people realizing that the political philosophies are different. But that's not a recent phenomenon. That's not a recent phenomenon at all. Because if that was a recent phenomenon, then Kropotkin, the dude who wrote The Conquest of Bread, a thesis criticizing Marx and his flavor of communism, talking about how his vision of the revolution was not one that would be sustainable because Marx's version of things was very much proletariat, rise up, do your thing, seize the means. And the socialist Kropotkin responding to him going, actually, my guy, you understand that if you dismantle all the systems that are there, you're gonna have people who can't get bread. You have to solve the problem of bread. But in your revolution, you're going to dismantle all the ways people get their bread, the thing that they need to survive. That's what that book is about. So is it a recent phenomenon when the people who we can mostly argue are some of the prevailing minds in writing on their political philosophies, disagreed on how they would be implemented and even what words to use to describe themselves? I'm sorry, but is it a recent phenomenon of splitting hairs when there are differences in the political philosophies that were noted by their, I wouldn't even say originators, but by their propagators? Mr. Malachi says, how would he react if someone called him an anarchist? He would split the hairs.
Historically speaking, they were used interchangeably.
No, they weren't. No. So the people who used them, historically speaking, interchangeably, were people responsible for the Red Scare in the United States, where it became politically expedient for people who very much favored capital to split those hairs. That does not mean that those words were historically used interchangeably. That means that there was a group of people historically who used the words that way because it was politically expedient for them to do so. Again, the United States had a Red Scare for a reason. And what was the end result of that?
Anyway, nonetheless, whether it be young people, have people even my age, because they look at the general landscape and anybody that can come and promise them the world, like this utopian sort of view of...
What was the utopian view that was promised by Mamdani? Buses would be free and houses would be affordable. That's not utopian. That's, hey, you need to use buses to get around New York City. That is just a reality of how New York City operates. And you need to have a house in order to survive. A house is shelter. That is shelter from the rain, the cold, the wind. That is shelter from animals. That is shelter from disease. That is stability. That is bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a reason. That's not a utopian promise. That is, again, Mamdani's promises were buses, housing, not free housing, mind you, affordable housing. That was different. And that he would use tax funds from New York to fund food distributors, food retailers in New York, so that nobody would be without food they could afford, which would give competition to retailers in New York. Now, granted, it can be argued that a lot of those retailers in New York already have competition. If you've been to New York, food is one thing you can find practically everywhere, but it's always going to be food from like a stall or a truck, and usually it's going to be kind of expensive, not actually inexpensive, not affordable for everyone who's there. So him saying, hey, you're going to have more affordable food because we're going to raise taxes on the rich in New York by 1%. That's the number he used, 1%. And use that money to support infrastructure, support food, support housing, and support buses. Okay, that sounds fine. I've played SimCity. I've raised taxes by 1% before.
Of how I just want everybody in housing. It doesn't address why housing is the way that it is, which is often due to government involvement, especially in the grant and loan industries, whether it be with money not going as far as it needs to for people to be able to thrive, right? But this pipe dream, people look at homelessness, and this is where people get...
Wait. No. Go back to the pipe dream. Go back to the pipe dream, my guy. Why are we diverting our topics back and forth? Why are we gishing our gallops? Why are we not focusing on the thing we are trying to prove? You still haven't proved he's a communist, by the way. You've said he calls himself a socialist, and then you've said leftists split hairs on that, but they actually mean the same thing. You've never actually substantiated anything in this whole video. You've done trust me, bro, which, by the way, is the same way you called me a fucking pedophile in your video on me, you goddamn raisin.
Wrong, including some folks on the quote-unquote right. They look at homelessness often as this thing that it can be cured by, like, every person that's homeless is like in this box and they fit this particular mold, and it does not address the different types of people as well as the different types of circumstances.
Nobody's saying that all homeless people are homeless for the same reason. Where are you getting that information? There are people who are homeless because of bad financial decisions. There are people who are homeless because their families fucked them up. There are people who are homeless because they're trans and they got kicked out by their families. There are people who are homeless because they are addicted to drugs. There are people who are homeless because they couldn't stop selling drugs. There are people who are homeless because of a variety of reasons. Nobody anywhere that I have ever seen with any level of merit says that all homelessness is caused by the same thing.
To why someone could not be in a home. Okay. And I'm talking just on the individual level. I'm not talking about like even from an external deal. Like I've had people, even kinfolk that, we raised, they just can't get right. Right. Gambled their money away, whatever it may be, put themselves in a position and it was their action. It wasn't the big bad boogeyman trying to keep them unhoused or something of that nature. So but they lead with that, right? They lead with, don't you want everybody to be housed? Don't you want everybody to be fed? Don't you want the poor people to eat? All these different things. And this is how they can convince large.
I'm just curious here. If somebody is addicted to gambling, should they not still be allowed to eat? Is that the premise you're really working with? I'm just going to use your logic. I have family that was addicted to gambling, and that is why they did not have money. Therefore, they did not require food, because you started with that and then you moved on to that other part. If your position is that somebody who is addicted to gambling, and if you and I can agree, which I hope we could, that addiction is a sickness that we need to be helping with, why would you say that person does not deserve food? Like the basic essentials to live. Why do we view people who have a problem with gambling under this lens that they are the problem? And sometimes they are, I'm not denying that. But why do we view it that way instead of viewing the companies who incentivize gambling and push it in their games? Why do we not hold those people accountable for the damage they are doing, that they know they are doing because they have used psychological studies to figure out how to wire into the human brain and trigger the dopamine centers that allow gambling to thrive? Why would we not hold those people's feet to the fire? Why are we so focused on the people who are victims of that?
Groups of people to adopt their economically illiterate positions that, again, have been attributed to so many deaths over the course of modern human history. They can get away with that because people are looking, and yes, folks are struggling. I've made this argument for a very long time. It's not either taxation, it's theft. Obviously, I believe in that. It's more accurately putting it, it's extortion. Theft by way of extortion, and saying that capitalism somehow robs the quote unquote workers. This is again a guy that doesn't know quite much about how businesses work. They don't understand the general concept of risk or any of that. And there's the stuff that I've discussed over videos over the last 15 years. Not going to go into that. What I want to talk about for this video more so is I need the people on the economic right. And the reason why I use that term is because folks call themselves whatever. Libertarian, conservative, like liberty conservative, minarchist, whatever you call yourself. If you believe in private property rights, if you uphold that to be true, this is who I'm talking about when I discuss the economic right. I don't care how much you dislike I use that term. Because if
who dislikes that you use the term? Socrates is minarchist? No. He's using minarchism. He's talking about minarchism, not menarchism. Minarchism. Not the same thing. And I'm going to Google the term because I do not remember every term ever, but a minarchist is a political philosophy that advocates for a minimal state with the sole purpose of protecting individuals from aggression, invasion, and fraud. Basically, you want there to be, it's not even a proper use of the word fucking anarchist, but you want no government outside of the government that is just big enough to protect you from bad things happening to you. But like, not bad things happening to you from being homeless or being sick or starving, not from like the things that people deal with on a day-to-day. No. It's there to protect them from solely boogeymen. You want government Batman. You want government Batman more than anything. Classic government you can drown in a bathtub. Yep.
I say all the people that are of this ilk, and I label them folks and just get mad at that. Nonetheless, you need to get right. I think especially those that are politicians that claim to be aligned with the right often adopt leftist positions anyway, especially leftist positions of 10 years ago. But the fact that you've been so soft, so willing to compromise with the left on so many different issues, which does nothing but muddy the waters. So when something bad does happen, they attribute it to you.
No. You got to name the issue. If you're going to say that the right wing that you disagree with is compromising with the left on so many issues, then you need to be willing to name what a couple of those issues are. Otherwise, your point has no saliency. In order to make a salient point, there must be something of worth within it. But when you say all these issues, but you don't illuminate what any of those are, a viewer is able to input whatever they think that issue may be into the blank box you created. It is a used car salesman tactic.
And because you're not full force going after, getting rid of the taxation, getting rid of the regulatory bodies that really prevent entrepreneurship, prevent people from having some level of self-sufficiency. They don't work nearly hard, especially at the federal level. They don't work nearly as hard as what they need to. They're very soft. Everything has to be a compromise. Everything is, well, we can't do this now. We can't address the spending efforts because of this reason and that reason. And we got to compromise, got to kick the can down the road.
Yeah, but what are they compromising on? Can you explain what they're compromising on that you hold umbrage with? Can you do that? Can you be intellectually honest and do that? Or are you just going to keep on putting this fill-in-the-blank version of your argument, where anybody ever can just fill in the blank with whatever they think the compromise that they disagree with was? Robbie says, my glob, he's stuffed the homunculus with so much straw. Said compromise is what he's talking about. The current administration doesn't know that word. Yeah, also, that's just kind of a funny thing to say, because right now, the Trump administration has been operating without compromise. The United States Supreme Court argues that the Trump administration needs to pay out SNAP benefits because we appropriated the funds, Congress appropriated those funds already, and Trump says no. And then the the judiciary body that is supposed to be there to make him do that, to be the checks and balance, he goes, no, I'm just not going to do that, even though he's been told by the Supreme Court to do that. I'm sorry, but I can at least, when I'm giving a point, I can at least give an exact instance where that point happened or is salient. Whereas what you're doing right now is this fill-in-the-blank shit. And it's dumb. Also, this warrior is definitely going to die? I tried to save his life. Dude just died to Hogger. Don't get me wrong, Hogger's strong. Hogger got hands. But my guy, if you had ran towards me, I could have feared him. Trust in the players around you, lest you become a corpse. Wait, did he die? Hold on, where does corpse go? Wait, he didn't die? No, he actually got away. At least I don't see his body. Anyway.
Road, the can get kicked down the road, and then it's time to address it again. Nothing happens, and here we are, yet again. And while people are suffering and don't know any better, let's be honest, this is why, come on, man, it's democracy. It is the literal God that failed. It's one of the worst political positions or rather political setups, right, that you can have. I know that's going to be controversial among some of you guys because everybody conflates, unfortunately, democracy with freedom when it's anything but.
Oh, he doesn't like democracy? That's weird. You don't like people being able to influence their government? You don't like people having a say in what goes on in their government? That's weird.
This idea that just because a bunch of people, let's say 50% of people voted for a said thing, that makes it just righteous or free is nonsensical. When you break it down at that fundamental level, I don't care what your teachers and academics said, it doesn't make any sense. Yes, majority rule can be and has been bad. It's not freedom.
Yeah, nobody's saying the majority rule hasn't been bad, but when you're saying it's not freedom, you have to ask the question, what is your proposed alternative? Because the classic conversation about democracy is almost always that democracy is one of the worst political systems imaginable, except for all the others. When you compare it to oligarchy, which we are closer to now than ever, when you compare it to just a completely unregulated society with no checks or balances, when you compare democracy to monarchism, when you compare it to the alternatives, it's better than the rest. It may not be great, it might even not be good, but it's better than what we have access to. Right now, I can go down to the Georgia State Capitol and have gone down to the Georgia State Capitol, and I can confront my local politicians about things I disagree with, and I can have a measure of success at that. Because when I went and did that with Georgia Equality, we successfully got Republicans to stay the vote effectively on a bill that would have not demonized, that's not what bills do, but would have disincentivized trans healthcare in our medical system here in Georgia. under the guise of being a bill to support the flow of Narcan. That is a thing that I was able to do because we live in a democracy. I would prefer another system, but here's the thing. I don't know what that other system would be. When you can conceive of a better system that yields better results and doesn't fuck up the world for, minority groups, then sure, let's have a conversation about that system. But again, I don't really expect the guy who could not articulate why he thought that I was a kitty diddler and yet made an entire fucking video on it that got me harassed for weeks. I don't know if that guy has the mental acuity to create a system that is better than what we currently have. And I know that's very, very fallacious of me, and I'm operating with a poisoned well. But I'd like to also reiterate, I ain't the one that poisoned the well. And that's as much as I can handle with that video. This guy leaves a sour taste in my mouth, obviously because of the history that we had before, but at the same time, he leaves a sour taste in my mouth because his ideas have no salience, but he says them with such confidence. You don't get 500,000 subscribers by being super passive with all of your positions. You say them with confidence and charisma, and he's got those things. I will give YoungRippa his due. To his credit, he 100% has those things. But his ideas are also dumb, and I'm just missing the rest of them. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitt, I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.